Well, I mean, like the objectives, very often we, I don't know, just.
I know what you're
Yeah.
getting at. Okay,
I'll move
You'll move it?
yeah, as amended.
okay, all in favor? Perfect, that's approved. And we'll start with our scheduled delegations, Mr. Pratt.
Aren't we going to do the vote on selected debate?
We were just gonna debate everything when we talked about that last meeting, just going through and doing them all, as opposed to taking less or extra time to do that. That's what we talked about last meeting.
Did we vote on that, whether we were gonna do that? I know we were discussing it.
No, I don't know if we voted on it. Yep, whatever.
I just provided a request for decision for every article on the agenda, so.
If you wanna open that up again, we certainly can, but,
But now it's too late because the agenda's been adopted.
yeah, well, we can do it next meeting, we'll talk about it, we'll put that on as an agenda item, Brian, if we wanna go back to that reports.
Yeah, because as it works, Brian Martin said, that even though there's a request for decision, if we don't debate it, then whatever you suggest passes.
Okay, sorry, go ahead, Lindsay.
This mic on?
No, it's not. You gotta press that little button.
You're on.
Yeah, we're good to go. Thanks everyone for inviting me. Every couple of years, 2 to 3 years, we come out and do a presentation to all our councils. I think this is number 7 or 8 out of 11 that we're going to this month. What we'd like to do is just come out and do a quick presentation on what Harper River Housing does and how we do it, and then I try to leave some time at the end for questions. I'll go through the documentation that I sent out. I'll go through that really quickly, and then we'll open the floor for some discussion after that. So Harper River Housing basically has 3 business units. The first business unit is our provincially owned units that we manage on behalf of the province. They fund us about a $900,000 deficit on those units. We have family housing and senior self-contained under those units. People come in, apply for them, they're point scored across on a provincially approved point scoring system. And at that point in time, they're put on a wait list, and as the unit comes available, they're put in according to their highest point scores. Right now, our rents include water, sewer, and gas, and power is charged over and above that. Our average rent in family housing is about $375. And so as you understand, that barely covers utilities, and so you understand that that's where their deficit funding must come from the government if we're going to help these low-income individuals. The senior self-contained is very similar. They pay 30% of their income, and water, sewer, power is included in that, and then power is charged over and above it. The third part of the provincial program is the rent supplement. We think it's a very important part of the program because of it helps us fill the gaps. Most of our units in the family housing especially are 3-bedroom units. If somebody comes in on age or a single mom with 1 child or a single person with 2 children, they don't match up to a 3-bedroom, we should have a 2 or 1 bedroom. If they can go to the private sector and find that house that fits them or the unit that fits them, then we can subsidize, pay up to $40 in the subsidy a month on that. So it's a real good program that kind of fills in the gaps on it. So that is, in High Prairie we have Golden Age Manor and, the two seniors apartments over there by the tennis courts. And then we have about 55 family housing units, and we rent up about anywhere from 70 to 80 units in High Prairie. So quite a substantial portfolio right in town. And again, we're spread out all over the Peace Country here, so High Prairie is not our only location. Our second portfolio is what we own, and we have 2 fourplexes in town. The rent in there is set at $650, so it's an affordable housing complex. We get no government funding for it. We got 70% capital, and we had to borrow 30%, that's been paid off, but that was 15 years ago. And so those are targeted to kind of that in-between people that will never get into our low-income housing and yet struggle to get into the market. So it's really a unique program that really works well, and it's always full for those people that just can't quite get ahead, and we can give them some help on that. Also with that is Iossagan Manor in Fox Creek is a senior self-contained building that we built 15 years ago with affordable housing money, the same thing, the 70% capital and the 30% we borrowed and paid back. We also have a contract with Lesser Slave Lake Regional Housing where we supply their corporate services, their CAO and some capital maintenance for them. Any revenue generated from any of those programs that go back in stays in owned. The last part of that program is a lease to purchase program. About 12 years ago, we were given some funds and we bought modular and trailers in our small communities and set up a lease to purchase program. We set the capital cost, divided it by 25 years, and they cover their own utilities, their own maintenance. They pay us for the insurance and we pay it, and they pay us for the taxes and we pay the taxes on it. So it's a program that's worked very well. We had upwards of 46 at one time. Over the 15-year period, we've only had 3 that we've had to foreclose on. So the program's worked very, very well. We've had some people buy out and move on. About 4 or 5 years ago, the province gave us another 15 of those units that we manage under the family housing, 5 of which were in High Prairie. We targeted those houses to a lease to purchase on clients that were in our units already. So people that were getting close to market or could afford it, they're now in a lease to purchase. But we did change the program. Instead of being interest-free for the whole 25 years, we went, the first 5 years are interest-free, the second 5 years I think is 2%, the third 5 years is 3.5%. So after year 10, they could probably go to the bank and do it cheaper than they would with us. And they could stay with us if they want, that's not a problem, but it gives them that flexibility, gives them the understanding of market, gives them the understanding of how a mortgage would work. Again, as much as it's a lease to purchase, they still have that option to buy it out at any time. So it's been a very successful program, and we're looking forward to doing that down the road in some other capacities and in some other communities. So that's our owned program. Any questions so far? Yep.
Sorry. You said they can buy out at any time. Is that penalty free?
Yep. Okay. Yes. Because the money basically that we get gets reinvested back in. And a prime example is Fox Creek. We're building on to our Fox Creek Iossagan Manor 10 units. We're building on another 8. And so we had to put some money in on that. We got $1 million from the province, $2 million from CMHC, $2 million from Greenview, not for the housing, but for the common area that we built onto it. So if we don't come up with a little bit of money, I think it was $600,000 that we put into there, and all that is from money that we've gained either for the contract, for lease to purchase, so that's reinvesting, and we're starting to build money in our reserves for that to be put back in there. And again, anything that comes out of the provincial budget can't go into owned, and owned can't go into provincial, so we have to really keep those separate. And we're able to build some reserves out of our own budget. Our third, go ahead. Okay, our third portfolio is our lodges. We have one in Valley View, one in Falher, and one in High Prairie. Our lodges basically our rent is $12.50. If your income is under $29,000, it's $12.50. If it's over $29,000, you pay another $402. If it's under $29,000, we get the $402 from the province. So it's really helped stabilize that. The other money to cover the cost of it, because it costs about $2,300 a month to operate one of the units, comes through requisitions. So as you see on your property tax, Heart River Housing, requisitions, that's us. So if you guys ever get any complaints on that dollar amount, you don't have to deal with that. That's my tax. You send those people to me, and we'll deal with that. 2 years ago, we went to all 11 municipalities, and we asked them to support us in building onto our lodges. And to do this, we wanted to build capital reserves a little bit up front and able to use that for seed funding and then borrow money on it and have an ability to pay it back. Our board made some not risky decisions, but aggressive decisions. If we're not gonna do this, the private sector's not coming in to build a lodge or build a private sector part of the lodge. So if we don't do it, no one's gonna do it. So we did a needs study in the region. It said we should build 30 units. Brian kept telling us we should build 30 units. But it was a little bit of too much of a risk for the organization, so we built 20. There's 34 applications now, so maybe Brian was right. But and again, we have to look across the region on what we're doing in every community so that we can meet the need everywhere. So right now we are in the construction phase of that. We should be moving people in September, October, somewhere in there as the dates are right now. We're scared to give a date because things move all the time in the construction part of it. But what we've tried to do as a board is build for the future, not the past. My grandfather moved into the lodge in High Prairie. It was 180 square feet. My mom and dad moved into the lodge in High Prairie. It was 380 square feet, still bachelor suites. When I'm going to move into the lodge, which isn't very far away, it's going to be, I want a bedroom. And I'm going to be willing to pay for it. And so we need to give those options to our seniors. Otherwise, I'm going to Grand Prairie, Edmonton, Calgary. I'm moving out of the region. And if we want to keep our seniors here, we need to present them some options. There's absolutely going to be seniors that move out, no question. But we don't want to force people to move out if they don't have to. So that's what we've done in this bill. We've built on to the lodge, and we've built 1 and 2 bedroom units, fully serviced, with no lodge services. As they age in place, they can add those lodge services to it. They can go down, get a meal a day, all those kind of things. But after they're done, they can take the full lodge package and stay where they are. And that portion of the new project is all self, it'll pay for itself. Once the capital is paid off, the operating will pay for itself on there. So it gives us some more options. And people have said, well, all you're building is for high income seniors. Well, what it's done, it's freed up some space on the other end for low income seniors where we get subsidies from the government from. So it's really helped us on both sides. And we're looking that down in the future, are we going to have to take those bachelor suites and turn them into 1 bedroom units? Because are we going to get people moving in? We're already starting to see it down south. We're already starting to see it a little bit in Falher, where people don't want to move into those bachelor suites. I've got a wait list in Falher for 20 people, all for 1 bedroom units. But they do not want to move back into the bachelor suite unless they absolutely have to. So again, it's just we're trying to build for the future, not the past. We're trying to make sure that if we listen to the government or we wait for the government to fund us, we won't have anything. There's lots of management bodies in the south that have had lodges that were built the same time as we did. Our previous board made a conscious effort to keep upgrading and keep improving, and our lodge in town was built in 1960. And yet we have no desire to build it to tear it down. We think there's some options that we can do to improve it down the road, and we have the flexibility to do that. So those are some of the kind of things that we're trying to be proactive instead of reactive. So I'll stop there for a couple minutes before I start talking about the new direction. Any questions on any of that?
Okay, so I have a list of questions. Should I wait till the end?
No, fire away.
Okay, so what's the level of care at the lodge? Are your residents self-sustained, or are you needing nursing care in there?
Theoretically, you move it as a 100% independent senior. We do have a level 2 home care that's available. We do not control it. It's a service that's delivered by Alberta Health into our facility. So level 2 care, an easy way to think of it is scheduled care. I get my pills on Monday, I get a bath on Tuesday, I get my hair combed on Wednesday. And there's no deviation from the schedule. So it's very scheduled care for those independent seniors that just need a little bit of help. Once they have level 3, they don't deliver that in our lodge. We work really hard to try and get that because I think it's a space in between where we could keep lots of people in a home environment instead of an institution environment with a little more care, with flexible care. But we've been shut down on that, and that's why we went the other way to go to more of an independent senior that are coming in, and they can still access home care, they can cook their own meals, all that kind of stuff. So some real flexible options there.
So this nursing staff that's at the lodge. Is that 24 hours, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, 5 days a week?
I do believe there are 18 hours. I do not believe they're full-time, full 24 hours. So again, with scheduled care, theoretically, we don't need 24-hour care. We'd like to have it, especially because we only have one staff on at night. But again, we don't control that. That's Alberta Health Services that controls it. And we've pushed for it, and we've pushed for that flexibility in care, and we basically got our hands slapped and said, no, that's not your problem. You do the housing, we'll do the health. I know, very frustrating,
Okay.
very, very frustrating.
So is there a multidisciplinary committee where you guys figure out who needs a bath, who needs their hair combed, who needs their pills and stuff like that? Do you work with Alberta Health Services in that, or are they independently coming in and doing their own thing? So we have
100%
two.
independent. We do not assess that. The only time that we would step in and assess that, if they weren't getting the care from there and they couldn't safely live in our facility. And we still wouldn't supply those services because those services would be health type services coming out of requisition dollars, which we're not crossing that line. Because the government would love us to cross that line, to take requisition dollars and pay for health. But do you guys want to pay for health?
So when they're getting their bath,
Yep,
that's Alberta Health Services, that is not lodge.
nothing to do with us.
You only feed and house.
Good questions, because we went to uniforms with our lodge staff years ago because of that, because everybody felt that those were all our staff, and they're not. That's Alberta Health Services staff. The government has just announced that they are looking at accepting proposals for us to become, to come into a contract situation where we would contract those services to the government, and then we would hire that staff. We will be looking at it over the next couple of years, but it's a scary slope. It's a scary slope, and I think we could do a phenomenal job of it, but if the dollars don't follow it, where are we gonna pay for it?
Okay, so I'm still need some clarification here. So you're not working, like I said, with a multidisciplinary unit. So when it comes to dietary for health reasons, who's doing the menus? Is that Alberta Health Service?
No.
Or is that you?
No, we have an independent, through our accommodation standards, there's a government regulatory board called Accommodation Standards, and they come in once a year and go right through our logs. They check our meals. So we have to have our meals all approved by a dietitian every year. And so we have a menu that's set out, and we can vary from it a little bit, but generally speaking, we have to serve this type of food, this type of food, and this type of food, so many days a week, and it's all set out for us. And all that has to be approved.
But you are supplying like a diabetic meal and a regular meal?
If somebody comes forward and requires it, absolutely. But they'll have to tell us that. We can't assess them, health-wise.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these people who need their insulin prior to meals, after meals, whatever, that's Alberta Health Service. Okay. You continue on, I have
No,
more
but
questions.
it's a good question, because that's where we get into the trouble. If they don't share with us, then how do we know? And in some lodges, the communication, in High Prairie Lodge, it's actually very good. We have a good working relationship with home care here. In some of our other lodges, they won't even tell us who's on home care. So there's a real disconnect, and it's super frustrating. And we've worked over the years, okay, let's have a meeting with upper management, everything goes good, yeah, we're gonna do that, and then it falls apart. So luckily here, our lodge manager and the home care manager have a really good relationship, and it works very good. So we're hoping that it stays that way.
Okay, just one more
No,
question for
that's good.
clarification. So when you say home care services, are they staffing RNs, LPNs, or personal care aides?
Mostly personal care aides. They do have an RN and an LPN come in, and now I'm not exactly sure, like they would come in and assess the individual on a time frame. I'm not sure what that is. Okay, they would do an assessment. Okay, you need this type of care, and they would set it up, and then the care aides deliver that care. The frustrating thing is, if I've got an infection and and I'm off my rocker a little bit and things aren't going, and I need some extra care, they have to go to the hospital to get it, and they can't just get that extra little care from home care, because of the level 2 flexible care. I can't be upset at the staff, because that's what they've been told to do. And it's super frustrating, because I think we could deliver a way better product.
Okay, one more question on this.
Yeah.
So, you have an infection and you need care at the hospital. Are you using an ambulance for that or a medical transport?
That's up to Alberta Health Services and the patient, nothing to do with us. Good questions, because these things are misunderstood, that Alberta, that Hard River Housing delivers health services and we don't. So thank you for those questions. Okay, any other questions before I get into what the government's having to do? Question? No.
Just my experience.
And I guess we'll talk a little bit, the government did an affordable housing review of everything that they own in housing, and everything they fund. And they've come up with a new direction of pushing management bodies to be more in the business of housing. My personal opinion is I think they're trying to get out of deficit funding, which scares me, because then our low-income housing that we have, it's going to either disappear, be reduced, or changed. So I'm concerned about that. They're talking a lot about mixed income. So if we have 100 units, we might have 40 or 50 of them at market rent, in which our organization does not want to get into the market rent, because we shouldn't be competing against the private sector. We don't want to go down that path. Because as soon as you start competing against the private sector, they stop building, they stop coming. And we have a hard enough time getting housing in this community anyways through the private sector. It'll make it even harder. So we were a little nervous about that, because the income that would be generated from your market rents would pay for some of the social housing, but we're still at the same number of units. So that means our social housing numbers are going to go down, in which we already have a wait list of 76 people on our wait list.
For the lodge or?
Family housing. Our lodge wait list is about 11 or 12. Our enhanced, the new building, our wait list is 34. Our wait list for our senior self-contained apartments, which is about 25 to 30. That's where our real pressure is. And we're hoping some of this addition that we're adding on to the lodge can help us relieve that pressure. So the other thing the province is doing is wanting the municipalities to take a leadership role in needs studies. And we have no problem with that, if that's the game you guys want to get into. But we just did one. And instead of doing one in High Prairie, we did one in the region. We reached out to all reserves and settlements, we reached out to the county, we reached out to the town, we reached out to all the FCSS, all those organizations. We had seniors meetings. So for us, because we're in the business, we would like to still take a leadership role in that, if that's okay with you guys. But we'd like to do it as a partnership. We'd still like to have your input and everything like that. But the government would like to see you guys take that leadership role. What I'm scared of, if you do a needs study and it says that you need to build 25 family housing units, they're going to go, where's your share?
Yeah.
And do we want to get into that? Our board is very strongly supported that low-income family housing should be a funding of the province, not of the municipalities. You guys already fund the lodges, and I think that's a nice line in the sand to stay with. What's happened is Edmonton and Calgary has pushed a lot of that funding out from their perspective, and so the province is saying, well, Edmonton and Calgary can do it, why doesn't High Prairie do it? So there's a slippery slope coming in, and we just have to work together to make sure we're on the same page. Brian, any other comments on the new direction of the government? Board competencies, I guess we could talk a little bit about that, but I'm not sure it's a huge issue.
Yeah, no, I think the big thing for our community is, like you said, it could theoretically reduce how many units are in our community for the lower income people. So that's an important piece to keep in mind, and it would create competition for the people that already have rental properties, which, yeah, that's the big thing. I don't know if we really want to go down that road.
So in the next couple of years, because this strategy is just coming out and it's kind of, there's still some details that need to be worked out of it. In the next couple of years, our board's gonna have some real deep decisions in every one of our communities to really push that envelope on what we wanna do. And we'll be coming back to you guys to get, your opinion too. Brian will bring it back and where do we wanna see this going? Are we willing to help fund that? One of the big things, they want any new affordable housing buildings built that are tax-free. Property tax-free. The buildings that we have in town, we pay taxes on those, property taxes. And we should, because we can make it break even and pay our share. But the government says, well, no, the municipalities have to pay some, they should have all those exempt. Well, you know what? In our small communities, like I look at McLennan, 52% of their buildings are non-taxable. By the time you do their social housing, churches, government buildings, 52% of their buildings are non-taxable. And so it's scary for our small communities.
Especially considering that the government has cut back on the grants in lieu that they give.
Yeah. Like you guys got knocked on the head for about $120,000 just in one stroke of the pen.
Yeah.
And that doesn't, where do you make that up?
Sorry, do you have more to present, or
No,
is this a good time for questions?
Please.
So two things, Lindsay, 2021, do you have an idea of what the town of High Prairie contributed to not only your lodge, but just to Heart River Housing?
It would only be the lodge.
Okay.
And I don't have that number off the top of my head. I could figure it out. If you look in the presentation,
Yeah, I see a percentage, but.
yeah, and so our total requisition was 1.3 for operating and another $1 million for the buildings. So 2.3, whatever the percentage of that is.
Okay, that answered that. Secondly, at the most recent Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the big platform for the big two leaders, Liberals and NDP, they talked about safe, accessible, affordable housing, and they harped on this new housing accelerator fund. Is there anything that you guys are leveraging with the housing accelerator fund? Do you know about the housing accelerator? Okay.
So we really communicate a lot with the other management bodies, and we have found this little gem by the name of Derek Weiss. He is tied, I shouldn't say tied in, but he is the ear of CMHC. And so he's done multiple projects for us in High Prairie. He got us $80,000 in seed funding. He got us a $5.6 million loan, co-investment loan, and a $400,000 grant. In Fox Creek, he got us $2 million from CMHC in a rapid housing initiative. He's got us another $50,000 in Falher on a seed funding, and we anticipate that we're going to go back for co-investing from them. There is two or three different programs that he's just announced that have come out that he's talking about. So we've committed to Derek to kind of be our guy moving forward and making sure that we maintain him. Because it's funny, our staff and myself did a seed funding for Fox Creek. We got $15,000. He did it a year later for High Prairie, and he got $80,000. And I thought we did a really good job, right? But he knows the language, he knows when to ask for things and knows how to ask for them. So we're very lucky. It costs us money, but we're very, very lucky to have him in our fold.
He's with CMHC?
No, he's a private consultant, but he's worked with CMHC a lot. And so again, anytime they have a new program, they reach out to him to try a few things, and will this work, will that work? So it's really a great connection that we've been able to tie into. The other thing is, and a great point, because I do believe that in the future the province is not going to do anything unless CMHC does something. And that's how we got the Fox Creek project. We did not want to build that with any debt, so we pushed hard enough that we were going to get an approval on CMHC money, but we were still $1 million short, and we went after the province. Because they keep telling us, bring partners to the table, bring partners to the table. Come on, you got to do this, you got to do this. Well, there's our partners, and so they couldn't say no. And so we want to do the same thing in Falher. We asked them multiple times to help us fund in High Prairie, and they would not. So we did get some help from CMHC. So we're going down the route of Falher, and we think we have to push hard on the province, because we're going to get some CMHC money. We fit into lots of the little boxes that they've put out. So hopefully we can do something there.
Okay, I'm just gonna see if there's any last questions, because we really do have to move on. We've got our auditors waiting, and I know another delegation.
Don't hold the auditor up, right?
Yeah, that's right, we wanna make. So
Just
you
one,
had a
just one,
yeah.
one quick question here. I missed it with the family housing. When someone moves into a family housing, is there a damage deposit presented?
Yes. First month's rent. And if
So
you're,
$375.
no, it could be $120. Because
Yeah.
our minimum rent is $120. So whatever their first month's rent is, whatever 30% of their income, that's their damage deposit, and that is a huge issue.
It is because I see in the vicinity that almost every time there's a move out, there's a renovation that's done to that home.
We, on
Are
our,
those damages,
Yeah.
how are those damages being covered?
provincially, it comes out of our provincial budget. And that's why it's so high. That's why our deficit funding is so high. Because at the end of the day, we did some numbers a couple of years ago because the government wanted to cut us back on our maintenance. 50 units a year, we move out of family housing. Our average repair bill is $5,000. We have out of those 50 units, probably 20 that are under $1,000. Basically go into a cleaning, fix a couple of dorms, good to go. We also have 15 on the other side that got trashed within like a 3 or 4 week period.
Yes, because I see dumpsters
Yep.
in the front yard and it's almost a redo and it seems like this is a continuous thing. The same house is getting a dumpster and a reno each time the family moves out.
Yeah, no, and we've done we've pushed really hard to make our houses at a higher standard than they used to be. When you move into one of our units, I would live in one of those, you would live in one of those. Otherwise, we're not moving anybody in. So we've kept those higher standards. So the repeats on the ones that we fixed up are surprisingly not very many. The ones that you see that dumpster across the street, that person's probably a long-term tenant in there that's finally moved out and we're gonna do it. We also get capital maintenance funding. We apply for about $5 million a year to the province for provincially owned capital maintenance projects, shingles, suite renewal, those kind of things. And out of that, we're able to pay for those things. We get about $250,000 to $300,000 out of the $5 million request. So we'll keep trying. If you don't ask, you don't get it. If at any time anybody wants to come and do a tour of our family housing or senior self-contained or lodge, phone me. Phone Brian up, he'll set it up or I'll set it up. Just the more people that can come and see what we do, the better understanding it is. I appreciate your questions for that because if we don't ask those questions, people don't know.
All right, thank you for coming in, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay.
All right. So we'll move on then to the Matrix Group, Noel and, Noel, sorry, Noel. There he is.
How's everyone doing?
Good. Can you hear us all right?
Good. I can everyone hear and see us?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so, Mayor Panessa, councilors, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. My name is Noel Chin. I am the engaged partner, and here I have Dale Zaslowski. She's the senior auditor that's been working along my side in with management, actually for a couple of years now, so she knows the file pretty well. Before I do start, am I able to get the screen sharing privileges? I'm going to put the audit findings report up on the screen for everyone.
Okay. You should have it now.
All right, perfect. Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Yes, we're able to.
Perfect. Okay, so before I keep going, I just want to remind everyone that after the presentation is done, please remind me to not exit until the authorization has been taken away, because I don't want to exit everyone out of this Zoom chat. Okay.
All right.
So as of today, June 14th, we substantially complete the town's financial statements. Okay, with the exception of our required communication to council, completing our subsequent events procedures, obtaining approval of council of the draft financial statements for the non-consolidated financial statements, and obtaining a signed management representation letter. So in addition to the 2 points that we have here, again, we are gonna, what we provided to council and management is the draft financial statements for the non-consolidated town of Hyde Berry. So it doesn't contain the waste authority and the library, all right? I think the waste authority is close to being done, but I just want to indicate that both of the entities, when we're consolidating, we're talking about maybe around a $60,000 to $70,000 change in the surplus for the town consolidated, so it's immaterial anyways. So in the event if the authority statements are not done on time, we'll just put what they have now, and if there's any changes, we can always record it as a summary of unadjusted differences. Okay, so I'm quite confident it's not going to have a material effect on consolidated statements for this town. Okay, so here at the core of all audit provisions, we want to ensure and convey that the concept of independence. Canadian Auditing Standards require that the external audits are independent of management. So Appendix 1 is our confirmation of our independence with management. So everyone from myself and everyone on the engagement team has no conflict of interest with management. Going on here, you know, we kind of talked about this, but I do believe there are a few new counselors, so I'm going to go over some of these items, although, you know, some of the continuing counselors, you've probably seen this before. But just to reiterate, what are our responsibilities, what are management's responsibilities, and what are, you know, counselors' responsibilities when it comes down to these financial statements. So our responsibility as auditor is to provide an opinion of whether or not these financial statements present fairly from a materiality standpoint, whether or not these financial statements are in accordance to accounting standards, public sector accounting standards, okay? So one of the things to remember is that audit procedures were limited to inquiries, substantive testing, substantive variance analysis, especially with management and council. So because we don't test everything, we cannot provide absolute assurance. So based on the concept of materiality, our audit procedures from Canadian Auditing Standards, we provide reasonable assurance, so I just want to make sure everyone remembers that, okay? With regards to the responsibility of management and those charged with governance, management is responsible for the preparation of these financial statements in accordance with public sector accounting standards. And again, we do compile the statements on behalf of management, but all adjusting journal entries, any changes from the date that we are providing a trial balance, any adjustments or changes that we see as a result of our audit procedures are brought to the attention of management, so that this is essentially their representation at the same time, okay? Our audit approach has been consistent from prior years. We form a combined approach where we understand that the town has controls that we can rely on, and also and by using a combined approach, it helps us reduce the amount of substantive procedures. Now, over the years, although we have continued using the combined approach, there have been, you know, based on some of the adjustments that we have identified and some of the errors that we have identified, we've had to perform additional substantive procedures to basically address some of the errors that we've encountered through the course of our audit. Again, materiality here hasn't changed. The materiality, again, is the concept of what is the dollar impact that the user of the financial statement would change their opinion if that error was not adjusted for. So common amongst many municipalities, typically the threshold would be the lesser of revenue or expenses, and here we've used the lesser of, we used the 2% of the total expenses, giving us roughly around $210,000 as an overall materiality. So we're not saying that these financial statements have $210,000 of errors, it's just that in the event that we identified an error that was $100,000 and management did not want to change it, we would record it as a summary of unadjusted differences, but would not necessarily change our audit opinion according to the summary. Okay? And again, I just want to reiterate that, you know, we always want to, you know, encourage a two-way communication between the auditors, council, and management. And so at any point in time during the audit, after prior to the audit, if there's any questions or concerns, please feel free to contact myself or our staff. We'd be happy to discuss. So the next part of the presentation, I'm going to kind of get away from the actual slides, okay? And I'm going to kind of go through it along with the actual financial statements in terms of kind of what are audit procedures, what are some of the variance analysis, and go from there. So can everyone still see, I guess, two PDFs? Can you guys see that clearly? One with the statement of financial position, and the other one's just the notes, okay? So before going to the detail, when it comes down to audits, audits are risk-based, okay? So you'll notice that for the next 4 or 5 slides of the audit finance report, we talked about what are some of the risks that we're assessing for some of these key components that we've identified. And what are some of the audit risks or our audit responses as a result of the risk. So if we look here, let's take for example accounts payable here, all right, we talk about the fact here when it comes down for addressing the risks is, are all accounts payable reported? So the completeness assertion is something that we're concerned about. We're not necessarily concerned about the ones that are the expenses and the payables that have been entered in the system. Is as of the end of the year, has management completely completely captured all the outstanding payables that although the vendors may not have invoiced the town, but we have accrued for it appropriately. So as part of our audit response for this, we've done subsequent event testing, where we obtain subsequent bank statements, and test basically items over a certain threshold to ensure that the invoices and supporting documentation is quarterly for the appropriate fiscal year. So based on our audit procedures, we did identify some adjustments that we had that was missed from accrued liability. So management has accepted these adjustments, and as a result, there weren't any significant. After management has accepted these adjustments, no further significant findings were identified. Looking at accounts payable here, we noticed that there's a drop of roughly $400,000. Primarily, this is due to timing in terms of when payments are being made. And I know that prior, a large part of this was a carbon tax levy that more or less did not exist in 2021. Okay. Moving back here, I want to kind of talk about the accounts receivable here. These 3 items here. So we have taxes and grants and place receivables, government receivables, and trade and other receivables. So in terms of the risk here, from an audit perspective, it's more or less valuation. Are all the receivables that are reported, will they be collectible still, right? Is collectability an issue? So we're not necessarily questioning the existence, it's more or less subsequent to the end of the year, will they be collectible? So our audit response when it comes up to these receivables are, we will also test subsequent receipts and receivables after the year end, just to ensure that, let's say for example, it's June 14, 2022 now. If these receivables exist as of December 31, 2021, they should be collected, and if they're not, we would require management as to why they weren't. So there were some accrued receivables that we identified that had to be adjusted for. These were proposed to management, and they did accept these adjustments as well. So as a result, there weren't any further significant findings when it comes down to accounts receivable. I just kind of want to show everyone here the notes. So note 3, note 4, and note 5, which will be around here. So essentially, when it comes down to government receivables, this is something that was changed last minute. I do apologize. The last year, number 2020, wasn't updated appropriately. The number never changed. It's just the classification within these did change a little bit. This is the updated amount. As you can see, the biggest key change that happened was that the town received the 593 of MSI capital funding from municipal affairs. So that was probably the biggest change. And also the increase of the federal gas tax and the Big Lakes County capital. That more or less explains this change from this year. When it comes down to trade receivables, really, again, when it comes to receivables and payables, it's due to timing. But we know for a fact that I think this had a lot to do with the utilities increase, with the cost of utilities going up. As a result, this also was a result of, utility invoices for those end of the months. Because they weren't collected, they were billed, they were a lot higher compared to the prior year. So that was also one of the reasons why there was such a large increase in terms of trade receivables, okay? Looking at the total assets for the town, we are looking at $10.9 million. Current liabilities, we are looking, for the liabilities, we're looking at 4.2. So the net financial asset, we're looking at around 6.6 million. Very, very healthy. Okay, so we've increased our net financial asset position. So essentially, the town's ability to pay off its liabilities with its current assets is in a very good position. And this increase more or less also is equivalent to what we're going to see in the statement of operations, which I'll go through right away. I guess before I move, are there any questions about, I guess, this top area here when it comes down to the net financial assets and liabilities?
Yeah, I don't see any around the table.
Okay, perfect. I hope I didn't lose everyone. I know it's late and we're talking about accounting, so it's a little dangerous. So I'm gonna just extend this a little bit bigger. We're gonna talk about the schedule, so schedule 5 here.
You can't see them, but their eyes are still open, so that's a good sign.
Okay. All right, I appreciate it. So here in schedule 5, tangible capital assets. So one of the things I want to kind of point out to everyone, why are these considered non-financial assets, right? Why are we worried about financial assets instead of non? Well, non-financial assets are basically assets that the town owns to generate revenue. They're not there for sale, okay? So that's why they're considered non-financial assets here. So looking at tangible capital assets here of $45.2 million, what this primarily entails is a few things here. We have $1.2 million of additions, and close to $4.7 million of transfers, basically from work in progress that's been accumulating from all the years, and they finally finished the actual addition, and now they're ready to put it to use. So this is just a little breakdown I'd like to give everyone, focusing on the WIP transfer here. This is kind of like a general summary here. You know, we got around $802,000 for the lagoon upgrade. The fire truck, $491,000. The water treatment plant filter was around 1.6. 56th Ave project, 1.1 million. The 47th Street rehab project around 605,000, and the Aquatica and Motorola each around 50,000. So this was all sitting in this construction in progress. It's finally moved to all the appropriate places within the capital asset entities, and now no longer the ending balance of their construction in progress is only around 61,000 as of the end of the year. Looking at the current year additions here. We're probably looking at the building, with regards to the building, one of the key ones is the water treatment plant. There's some upgrades that we've done for the water treatment plant, around 312,000. I think the sports palace room had around a replacement of 86,000, and then the aquatic center around 106. Okay, and then when it came down to machinery and equipment, there was around 41,000 for parks and recreation equipment, and the gas department had an addition for the line heater for around $53,000. Current year amortization, so this is more or less the accounting estimate right here of what the wear and tear would be. And then we'll kind of go over this in the statement of operation in terms of, this is not really budgeted for. This is more or less an accounting estimate. But this essentially is trying to, I guess, estimate what the wear and tear would be, so that in the event in the future year, if we have to replenish these assets, this is what we have to save up on an annual basis, is essentially what it's trying to say, okay? So $2.2 million of amortization expense. These disposal here were kind of random, but you'll notice one of the big ones here within the vehicles. This is all related to the fire truck, right? We have a new fire truck, we dispose of the old one, so that's kind of more or less an in and out, okay? So I'm just gonna kind of go back here. So moving on now to the statement of operation, okay? I do want to talk about kind of the key variances here. So revenues as a whole, what do we concern about? How do we compartmentalize it? So one of the things is that we break it up. So typically when it comes out to net property taxes, our understanding of this penalties, our understanding, we can do a really good static analytical procedure where we can get it down to a very minimum variance by taking the assessment values out of the form, compared to the approved bylaws, and we should have an expected revenue amount. So based on the calculations we performed, there weren't any significant issues there. The one thing I do want to point out here, this large change of around 400,000. So I'm just going to kind of go to schedule. Just going to go to schedule 2 here. Okay. So you'll see here, the tax actually, the increase in taxes was actually really roughly around a 2% increase. The reason why it's showing this 3.426 number here is just because in 2020 there was the COVID-19 tax relief. Okay, so that was the tax relief that was given to all residents. So for financial reporting purposes, we reduced it, removed it out of the revenue. But technically, the increase is really where you're looking at here around 4.7 compared to $4.6 million. net of the requisitions that are provided to the Alberta School Foundation seniors and the DIP, we're looking around 3.8 versus around 3.1. So that more or less explains the change in net municipal property taxes. For the orange tab here, the user fees, here, this is probably, I would say, the area that consists of high amounts of transactions, with low dollar values, essentially. So as a result, this would be a testing nightmare if we never actually performed any reliance controls testing. Okay. So as part of our understanding of the interim work, we have an understanding. We tested controls for utility billings to ensure that the rates, the heat factors, the pressure value factors, everything is kind of calculated correctly. There were some anomalies that we identified, we brought to management attention, but for the most part, things were actually calculating well. You'll notice that the user fees went up roughly around, we'll say $500,000, but so did the gas distribution costs. So essentially, this is just the cost of gas that increased that got transferred to the ratepayers, right, when we were charging the utility bill. So that's more or less what happened there. Again, after our testing, our discussion with management, no significant issues there. Government transfers, I just want to give a detailed breakdown of what kind of more or less changed. As you can see for government transfers, there's a significant increase with our transfer to capital, and that goes hand in hand with the amount of activity that happened this year for the town, for capital assets, which is the schedule that I showed everyone previously. Okay. And just to reiterate here, some people will be like, hey, how come our expenses actually are so much higher than what our budget expenses are? We're looking at 10.3 versus 9.24. Primarily, again, this is based on the fact that I don't think the town does not budget for amortization. So within each of the departments here are their fair share of amortization expense that they utilize. So roughly $2.7 million would be added here, right, to your bottom line. So essentially, for this year, the town has done a good job. We've stayed on a very good surplus. And we've actually maintained enough to replenish the assets, take care of the amortization expense that could be put away in the capital reserve for future use benefits. Okay. Government transfers for capital. This is a schedule that that's right here. This essentially is government grant funding that's provided to the town that's been spent for capital projects. Now, I do want to say that the recognition here of government transfer to capital does differ a little bit from the other. I would say the other financial reporting standards, because as long as we spend it, we can recognize the revenue. The one drawback here is that people are going to look at this and say, the general public, we have a $1.5 million surplus, right? But the surplus really is not $1.5 million because all the expenses is not being captured here. It's actually being recorded in the financial position here under tangible capital assets. So that's why it's very important that every year we're able to at least come to a balanced budget, including amortization expense. But if we don't come to a balanced budget that consists of amortization expense, then at least we need to get some confidence that once these assets retire, the town has a plan where either we're going to get external funding or we don't necessarily needed it. Okay? All right, so I'm just going to move back to the presentation here. Perfect. So I've kind of gone over this in terms of, what our audit procedures are and what we perform on a high level, kind of comparing kind of the variances from the prior year. So, based on our significant findings, the internal controls, they were operating as they intended. Of course, we did provide a management recommendation letter in terms of how areas that help improve internal controls and processes, some of them will carry forward from prior years. But it's June 14th, so there's no surprise here. This is kind of the area here. What were the difficulties that we encountered, right? So in 2021, along with prior years, there's been delays as management was not able to prepare for the interim year employment due to staffing issues experienced. We're getting there, we're getting better. But I think this year, our team, I know, worked hand in hand with Rita, and I want to thank Rita and her team. I know that a lot of the turnover has definitely made it a little difficult, and hopefully we've seen the end of COVID-19. I don't know what to say about the new monkey thing now, but, you know, that might be another thing that's gonna be coming the way, but, you know, we've also had consultants kind of assist on the TCA, but just to kind of let, you know, to gain a perspective of it, like, you know, we're trying to, I think we're slowly catching up a little bit, but again, it's still not there, and we hope that in the future, every year that goes by, that we can get a little bit more efficient going forward, you know. But again, it's not that management did not want to cooperate. Again, we work together, and I hope that in the future years, maybe, you know, we can get back in terms of being on site. But I do want to say is that when we're on site, we also want to expect that management is ready for us when we're on site, that we're ready to actually perform our work, you know, 100% at that point. Summary of unadjusted differences here. Again, we had some unrecorded statements. These unrecorded statements were more or less a byproduct of prior years, that instead of actually doing a prior year adjustment, we kind of closed through the current year. As you can see, it's not material, so we just flushed it through instead of doing a prior year adjustment. It's only $32,000 compared to our total material of $208,000. So with these unadjusted differences, because we actually pushed it through the current year, these errors will not carry forward, and it won't change the audit opinion as well. Okay? So at the end of the day, as of today, if there are any, you know, we've got some subsequent event testing that we will want to top up to today, but if there's no further, you know, big glaring errors up to $200,000, we have issued an unqualified opinion as of today. So I guess before I continue going to the last part of my presentation, any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. I guess the first one is, you'd mentioned at the start that the Waste Authority and the library, you haven't included them in because they haven't been done. I know we're late, so they must be very, very late in getting there. So what's happening with those two organizations that we haven't got information from?
The library actually is done. So the library actually is done. We just haven't, because the thing is, usually, I remember a couple of years ago, I think towns preferred us to present at least what the town's financial statements are, right? So that's why I want to present it. So the library, again, the library, if I remember correctly, is roughly around $9,000, right? They don't have much of a surplus. For the Waste Authority, I'm not sure. That's another partner within the firm. I think we're just trying to, I think they're trying to get correspondence as well. So I think it's just been management being able to get the information to us. But I looked at it, the file is substantially completed, but I just don't necessarily feel that we need to wait for them, you know. I looked at the financial statements already based on what they have. Because they're substantially completed, I think we're roughly at $50,000 of a surplus. We're only taking 50% of that in as well, too, right? So it's not even gonna change, and I'd rather get the town of High Prairie's, you know, consolidate them proportionately and get the FIR done before the end of June. I think that's the deadline that we have for municipal affairs. Like, even if those financial statements went up, let's say 50,000, went down 50,000, it wouldn't even change the statements, to be honest.
Okay, thanks for that. And the other thing, just so that I'm clear, you talked about there was a surplus, it shows, but then when you take depreciation away, you know, we're not making any, there wasn't a big surplus. Now, I understand the concept of depreciation, but we also have funds that we put into reserve accounts for covering depreciation, right? Now, when we're talking about the surplus, that's not, is that covering the money after what we had planned to put into those reserve accounts, or before those monies are put into reserve accounts?
So this is here, so actually, just to maybe answer your first question, you're actually not in a deficit after considering amortization. You're actually in more of a surplus. This 5,252 here, Brian, this, you know, when we take the revenues less this expenditure of $10.3 million, this $10.3 million actually includes that $2.2 million of amortization expense. So if we were actually to back out that amortization expense, you'd be looking at close to $2.2 million as an excess, okay? If we don't want to consider the amortization expense. Now, the reserve study still needs to be done. I think management still needs to actually do the reserve study. So what we've done here, and I just want to actually what I will do here is, this schedule, there's three things that is on the financial statements, right? There is the, unrestricted capital reserves, and there is equity and tangible capital assets, okay? Equity and tangible capital assets we can calculate, and that's what this schedule here is for. Essentially, the equity TCA is to take the net book value of your tangible capital assets, which is your cost, less all your accumulated amortization, okay, so that's your net book value, less whatever debt you have that's servicing your tangible capital assets. So that's how we know, and that's what the schedule is to basically reconcile that. At the end of the year, this is, although this is the net book value, but if we take away the debt, this is actually what the town owns, in terms of their assets. So it's like if I have a home, it's worth $800,000, my mortgage is still $400,000, my equity is actually only $400,000, right? Because I have to consider the debt that's actually on that asset. The capital reserve, I believe, we followed with management, I believe they've been updating the capital reserve accordingly. But again, I don't think the capital reserve study formally has been done yet. So we know that the surplus in its entirety is this number here, $52 million. It consists of, and let me actually give a schedule here for you, okay? Okay, so this $52 million, we know that this number is $43,277, that's the equity in tangible capital asset. The unrestricted portion and restricted, this is what we're talking about in terms of where is it? Is this number here supposed to be higher, lower? The difference of it will just go back into unrestricted. It's a swap between the unrestricted and restricted accounts. We're just waiting for the actual formal capital reserve study to be done. So let's say if it's actually 2.9 million, right? And we have 3.2 right now, it just gets flipped over to your unrestricted. So there's no net change in the actual total surplus. It's just a change between these two accounts here. The 5 million and 3.2.
Okay, now, I guess my question sort of around those reserves is we do plan and we budget to put some money into those accounts. And is
Yes.
that counted, I guess as part of the surplus before it goes into those reserves, or is it only counted, is it just a total and then it doesn't include the reserves? So let's just say we had planned to put $1 million into reserves. When you're looking at a surplus and it shows a surplus, is that before the $1 million is put into those reserve accounts or not?
Okay, so reserves are basically after income statement, right? So if let's say for example, you see how we have $1.5 million here? This is our surplus, right? This $1.5 million, you'll notice, we take the opening of this 50.6 million, which is the last year's closing, which ends up being our closing surplus. So whatever your surplus for the current year is, it goes into your surplus bucket, which consists of these three accounts here. What you then transfer, let's say you want to transfer $1 million, you're transferring the $1 million from your unrestricted surplus, which is already a surplus, your equity account. You're just transferring from a different bucket, so it's not unrestricted. It's now committed for future use. So going back to your question, yes, you have a surplus first. The surplus then goes into your actual accumulated surplus. And from there, when council actually says we want to transfer $1 million over, you're merely transferring from here, which is where it took the current year surplus of 1.5, which is sitting in here, and you're just transferring into the restricted surplus here. That's what it's for.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? Great question. Okay, I'm almost done. Bear with me, everyone. Okay, I just want to bring to everyone's attention of what are some of the upcoming accounting standards that will be in effect for the town. And to me, I think the biggest one most likely is this asset retirement obligation, public standards 3280. I guess, is anyone aware of this? Has anyone heard about this before? No?
No.
Okay. So I'll go through a quick overview. So in August of 2018, PSAB, which is the Public Sector Accounting Board, they issued this new standard. CS 3280, which is asset retirement obligation. Now, asset retirement obligation was actually taken from the concept of Part 1, which is IFRS, okay? Prior to, prior to the asset retirement obligation, there was actually two accounting standards. One that's known as landfill closure post-closure, and the other was contaminated site liability. Now, this standard 3280 comes into effect for fiscal years after April 1, 2022. So for municipalities, this will be taken into effect for the December 31, 2023 year end. So what is ARO? So ARO, which is the asset retirement obligation, is what is the legal obligation associated to retirement of a tangible capital asset. So costs that are associated with the asset retirement activities may include, but is not limited to, decommissioning of a tangible capital asset, remediation, post-retirement activities, and construction or TCA performing post-retirement activities. So in preparation of the standard, management needs to be aware and be prepared to identify, recognize, and measure. Now, before this, I'll just give a little bit of a background. As I alluded to earlier, prior to 3280, 3260 was liabilities for contaminated sites. And the other one, I'm just trying to see here, would be, I think 3270, which is the landfill closure and post-closure. Now, the thing that public sector accounting standards never consider, they only considered either landfill or something that had contamination, right, with it. But they never considered things such as, let's say, for example, if, let's say in the municipality, we took over a gas station, or, we took over our building currently, and the building has asbestos, right? Now, asbestos is something that in the future has to be dealt with, but the liability needs to be known now, so that when it comes down to, let's say, for example, levying, right, you are actually able to levy to anticipate what these future costs are going to be. Or for your example earlier, Brian, is how much you put away into your capital reserves, so you're prepared for these liabilities coming up in the future. So when it comes down to public sector 3280, asset retirement obligation should be recognized when all these following criteria are met. There's a legal obligation to incur the retirement costs related to the asset. A past transaction has occurred giving rise to the liability that has occurred. It is expected that the future economic benefits will be giving up, and at the end of the day, a reasonable estimate can be made. Okay? So in addition to 3280, there's an existing accounting standard, 3260, liabilities from county site, that continues to remain in effect. So under public sector 3280, a liability exists when all the following criteria is met. And the key thing here is the fact that there's an environmental standard that applies, okay? And contamination exceeds the environmental standard. The municipality or government is directly responsible, or they've taken responsibility for it. Now, that's the legal definition. I don't know what municipality who's not actually responsible for would want to take responsibility for that liability, but that's what the actual standards indicate, okay? So, again, here's a few examples here where we talk under, what's a liability under public sector 3280? So again, it can be incurred from an acquisition, construction, and development of a tangible capital asset. For example, we bought this land and all of a sudden we want to actually develop it so that it can be for commercial use, but because of developing it, we're gonna initiate some sort of chemical radioactivity measure. So that now becomes a liability that we have to deal with. So examples here we talk about, and again, I talked about the asbestos. A municipality purchased a building that was constructed prior to 1970 containing asbestos. Existing regulations dictate how the asbestos is to be remediated. While the public sector entity may not have any plans to dispose of the building, the obligation still exists and is incurred upon the acquisition of the building, right? So we want to know at this point in time, even though we're not going to touch it maybe for another 15 years, we don't plan to, what is the liability now, 15 years from now, that we actually have the present value so that we're ready for it come 15 years, okay? Nature of responsibility. The public sector has a clear duty and responsibility in other parts. So this may arise with agreements and contracts. Again, these are more, I'll go through in detail if we want to, but I just want to bring to this discussion that their management needs to, we have time, but this is just more or less a courtesy to say, when we're auditing and when we answer questions, you know, of your tangible capital asset, have you identified any of the assets that are potentially exposed to this asset retirement obligation? Have you done any studies to ensure that they're not? What's your position paper? So this is more or less a general guideline to help management kind of navigate through this new standard. And of course, if there's any questions or issues, we definitely would be happy to help. And this here is a summary table differentiating between asset retirement obligation and contaminated site liability, you know? So here we talk about the original liability. One through an acquisition, construction, development, use of a tangible capital asset. This one here, for contaminated sites, the liability result of contamination generated due to improper use of a tangible capital asset. And usually there's some sort of environmental, standard that's been exceeded that results in a liability having to be accrued, whereas asset retirement obligation, you know, contamination doesn't necessarily need to exist in order for the liability to be recorded. Okay. Nature of responsibility is a legal obligation. Under 3260, the public sector may have a liability resulting from direct responsibility or accepting the responsibility or commitment as a result of past action. We've also provided a decision tree here for management to kind of go over as well. You know, is there a present obligation associated with the asset retirement? Yes or no? So, you know, if you answer through here, you know, either you do nothing, either it's under a liability for contaminated sites, either it's an ARO, or it's just maybe just a general liability under section 3200. Okay. Again, this is just a high-level analysis I want to provide everyone just to kind of get the gears going, so that, you know what, come 2023, we're not rushing, panicking, contacting engineering studies to get these things done. Okay?
So just,
So, that is the conclusion of my presentation. I guess I open the floor for some questions now.
okay, I just wanted to ask about this retirement obligations. If, for what I'm hearing, it's gonna cost us money to do an engineering study on all of our assets, so that's number one. And then number two, once there's a liability identified, do we have to put aside funds to, and have a special account just for those liabilities? And I'll just use our town office. I'm 100% sure there would be asbestos in here. Let's just say that the asbestos abatement for this would cost $1 million. Do we need to have $1 million set aside to account for that liability?
Yeah, and the whole point of this, I think, you know what, to kind of take it away from all these fancy words of 3280, 3260, I kind of treat it more or less like a condo, right? So condo, there's always condo fees. So we know that these expenses are going to arrive, and that's the whole purpose of why we want to record the liability now. When you record the liability now, the important part of it is that it actually, it sits on this financial, so let's say we have one here that talks about asset retirement obligation. So there's a liability here, right? If we don't have this liability, and we know, as you indicated, the town building actually has asbestos, and we're going to have to deal with it, let's say in 20 years, this isn't giving a true indication of what the true net financial asset is. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, if we're saying that it's going to be a $500,000 job just to take care of the asbestos, this thing will be knocked down $500,000 because we're reporting the liability to show that. And it gives an opportunity for council time to actually, I guess, you know, if let's say we never record the liability, and then the asbestos was activated next year. Well, council will now, and management is now going to have to obtain their funds somewhere to pay for these expenses that they didn't budget for, they didn't see coming. So to your question, yes, that's what it's for. It's to say there's a liability, and based on the capital reserves and our unrestricted, should we actually set aside more, right? That's the purpose of this liability, right? It's not, and I agree with you, it's going to cause more engineering work. But I don't think the standard has created a liability for municipalities. I think this liability has always existed. It just becomes dangerous that we're not dealing with it now, where we have time, to levy for it instead of trying to do it all in 1 year. You know, if we only identify the issue the following year, for example.
Okay, is there any other questions? Oh, I see glazed eyes out there now. They're open, yeah.
I will be calling him.
All right.
Okay, well,
Just one.
on behalf of the firm,
Sir, hold it, one question is coming here.
The liability thing, is that just for government stuff, or is that for the private sector? Are they gonna have to, are they gonna have to start setting aside for that too? Is it, or is this just the provincial, federal government coming down on municipalities, or are they coming down on corporations everywhere for this?
yeah, like, typically if you are, actually, the asset retirement obligation standard actually came from the private side, the International Financial Reporting Standard. So I think everyone, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the acronym IFRS. So if there's any public companies that have, they already have to report, because as someone like a shareholder, myself as an investor, I want to know about these liabilities before I invest in the company. In the private side, in terms of Small Business Corporation Part 2, which is ASPE, accounting stands for private enterprises, they can elect to adopt this, but again, because it's not, because private enterprises for myself, like some of these small businesses, very rarely would they actually have these kind of asset retirement obligations, nor are people investing into their company, right? It makes sense why, I guess, it's finally coming now to the municipality side, is because stakeholders, ratepayers, citizens, they want to know kind of what they're involved in. As a council, as a municipality, these costs are going to be coming. So this is the only way to actually appropriate time for it. But it's not just, it wasn't generated for municipalities. In fact, public sector actually took it from another financial reporting standard to apply to the public sector accounting.
One other question from,
It's more of a statement, and I just wanted Noel to be here to reassure council that this is an accurate composite. So when we did our 2022 budget, I had an unaudited number of 1.187 as a surplus. Remember the document that we did? Okay, so if you take the $2.2 million amortization and decrease it by that amount, you'd have a deficit of 1.068 million. Or, no, rather a surplus, yes. Now, when we report the financial statements, we back out the long-term debt repayment because it increases our statement of financial position, and that cash is actually used to record the asset. It basically takes our liability down and increases our, it just makes our asset the true value. The net book value is then not decreased by the liability. Does that make sense? On the balance sheet, let's use that form, okay, which is now known as the statement of financial position. The $462,000 was the principal portion of our debt repayment. And then our capital reserves that we had budgeted for with the amount that we accrued, was actually 450, but we said we would put another 50,000 in operating this year. That's the 552,000 of capital reserves that aren't going to be showing up in this statement until next year when we actually do the reporting. We actually take it out of unrestricted reserve and put it in restricted, okay? Then in the reporting that I did, there was 54,000 of the asset, Alberta Capital Partnership grant that I missed. So those three totals add to the 1.068 million. So my unaudited amount was very close to, it's just that when we show the budget, it's using different look in order to get the numbers that we need to make sure that we have the cash flow to pay for our capital debentures and put money in capital reserves. Okay? Would you concur with that comment, Noel?
I heard bits and parts of it. I can't say it, but it sounded good, but I couldn't hear the entirety. But the one thing I did hear is, yes, so when you're doing your budget compared to, let's say, these financial statements, one of the biggest difference is that these are done under public sector accounting standards, right? Budgets on the other side, what you're doing, and some municipalities do it under PSAP, but I think the majority, they will do it more on a cash payment. You know what I mean? So sometimes some municipalities, they will record, you know, cash going out as a long-term debt payment. It was an expense item. Usually you have to move that out because it's actually a balance sheet item, right? So the reduction in cash, reduction in long-term debt, and as I think you indicated, would be an increase in terms of your taxable capital assets. But, you know, so I do agree with that part where there is a little bit of a difference in terms of, I think, what council sees as budget, which is more on a cash perspective, whereas the financial statements that we perform under public sector accounting standards are more on an accrual basis, following those guidelines under PSAP.
All right, one more question.
This might actually be for Rita. Where or how do you record adjusting journal entries?
Could you repeat that, Brian? I think you're closer to the mic. Can you-
She was asking just where or how does Rita do the adjustments on general entry?
Journal entries.
Yeah, general ledger entries.
I only ask Noel or Rita because we had to, previously there were internal controls in place to actually approve or just, sign off on them, like Mr. Mayor, for example. But here we don't do that, so maybe you didn't have any adjustments.
Wouldn't that be nice? But no, there are journal entries, but that's management's role to approve them and enter them into the municipal financial package.
So, yeah, I think kind of, I think I heard Olivia a little bit, but typically entering of the adjusting journal entries is management's rule. What we do is when the trial balance has been provided to us, we will then, if there's any adjustments or any entries, we provide all those adjustments after the financial statements have been approved, and we provide to Rita. And Rita will then enter all those adjusting journal entries into the 2021 year. And after she's done that, she will then reconcile to ensure that her trial balance matches what our trial balance is, because that will then essentially replicate what these financial statements were looking, so that we balance. And then they will close the year end so that, there's no longer any opportunity to change the 2021 year once it's been closed and reconciled.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions, so thank you very much for taking the time.
Okay, well, on behalf of the firm, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. And everyone take care. I don't know, I think we're going to have a few days of rain here, so good time to have meetings.
Yeah. And you should be good to sign off without shutting down the meeting for all.
Okay, all right. Everyone, take care. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Noel.
All right, and I know, as Councillor Waco mentioned, we have two of our staff here that have been waiting really patiently. We'll get through your two reports and then take a break and go from there. So we'll move on to item 3.1.
Public?
Oh,
Public delegations.
public delegation. I did, yeah, sorry.
I'll only be 2 minutes.
All right, sorry about that. I was.
Hey, good evening to council. Chris Clegg, Chair of Beautification. At least until tomorrow night, we'll see how our vote goes. We have our AGM. Just wanted to pass along a big thanks to administration. I stopped and talked to the girl watering the flowers the other day, and they were given directions on how to do it a lot better this year. That's all I'll say. We had some troubles last year, and council may not be aware, but they were instructed this year on how to basically give them a real good trick, and they're doing really well. So we're really happy with that. We thank administration for that. Second thing is it possible to get a number on what it costs for power for the Christmas lights each year?
Yeah.
Yes, we do, yes, we do have that number. It's a separate site ID, so we can provide that to you. Just come and find me. I just don't know it off the top of my head.
Okay, yeah, because I I talked with Mayor Panasic about this probably a year ago at least, never got it off the ground. I want to revive it in applying to ATCO for a grant. Whether that is for power for the town for relief on your bill, or whether that's a grant we would get to buy lights. We would see it as a win-win either way, and I want to get that going off the ground. So I'd like that number to present to ATCO. That's the reason I'm making that request. Simple. So that's all I had. Just 2 minutes, so. I know they've waited a long time, God bless them. You don't want to get on the bad side of the fire chief and the peace officer.
No, that's right.
Hey, thanks to council.
Okay, thank you very much.
Judy?
Yeah. She's not from that one. Okay, good. Okay, all right, so now we'll move on to the fire chief's report. Can I get a motion on this one? Okay, Councillor Martins?
I move the council receive the fire chief Cicerowski's May 2022 report for information.
Thank you. And with that, yeah, I'll turn it over to the chief if there's anything you'd like to highlight out of your report.
Okay, we're going back to the old method, I guess.
No, not necessarily, we don't vote on it.
For
Okay.
this meeting.
All right, I didn't have to actually intend on saying anything, but as in my report, basically I said the month of May has been extremely busy for us between training and school tours and other things going on. It's been a busy month, but we've managed to get through it. And I'm sure you all have been made aware of the Dolco fire that added some extra issues that we had to take care of, but it was all successfully done. And that's it. I'm open for questions.
Councillor Winkle?
How many grass fires this year on the top of your head, Trev?
Actually, very little, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I'd like to thank Trevor and the fire department for providing the barbecue for seniors barbecue, so thank you very much.
It was a pleasure to cook. Judy bailed out on me. Sorry.
There's probably a story there.
Rita, did I not ask you when you said, are we attending? Is it the flip burgers or what is it? And you said, oh no, the fire department's got that all under
Yeah.
control. Sure.
Yeah.
Mazzy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mazur's on here, but something like that.
All right, well, no good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We had the report for information. All in favor? All right, and get a motion on the peace officers report. Councillor Shishin?
The council received the senior peace officers May 2022 report for information.
All right, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Blue.
Good evening, council. Just to do a couple highlights. We have been seeing a more increase in dog attacks this spring, out of the norm of previous years. We're probably up at 10 to 12 attacks throughout the county and surrounding areas. Some serious, some minor, but it is out of the norm. I'm not sure what the maybe, yeah. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that to council's attention. Plus, we've had a couple interesting months with ban notices for people that have been shoplifting, loitering, drunk in public, and the businesses are at their wits' end on how to control this, and they get increased complaints from customers and, about being harassed for money or what have you, but, so that's been an ongoing issue also. And now that we're in the grass growing season, we're gonna start using door knockers, which will hopefully speed up the process as far as not having to send out letters in the mail, which take time, obviously. So we're gonna hang these on the door. We're gonna indicate the issue and obviously put date of compliance. But hopefully these will alleviate some of the problems of the boulevards and unsightly. But other than that, open to any questions.
Okay, thank you. Question? Councillor Stenhouse?
So with the increase of dog attacks, in your report you say 2 attack on person. With this increase, is it dog on person? What's the attacks?
Dog on person.
Wow.
Just, we had one Monday night in Canuso.
Yeah.
Guy was mauled by 6 dogs.
Wow.
Saw the picture.
Maybe we need to review our animal bylaw.
That's,
But that's,
the,
there's extenuating circumstances there too.
the majority of these, Alan, of these attacks, these are in the county, right? How many are dog attacks in town happening, or?
There's been 3.
I'm so confused about my next question. I was saving it for the CAO, and it has to do with an unsightly.
Mhm.
The Ukrainian church behind here. Has the grass ever been cut on that in the last 3 years? Who owns it? Or are they getting tickets?
That particular one has been sent to no notice, but unfortunately nobody's there to see this. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but it has been done in the past. There's a volunteer, I assume, that does it, but.
So you know the owner and you've been sending them letters when it gets out of, gets outside of, yeah, contact information. Yeah, no,
It's a contact because I believe it's Edmonton. Yeah,
yeah.
the contact is actually Edmonton.
So, yeah, it's just an ongoing. Issue.
Yeah, I want to bring that back up in the CAO's report.
Councillor Danaka?
This isn't really a question on your report. Is Erica now back?
Yes, Eric's back here.
So this is, I guess, maybe a question for the CAO. What is happening with Linden? Linden? Is the name Linden?
He's long gone. He's
Oh, he is?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's gone.
He's employed by the Big Lakes County.
Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you.
As a peace officer?
No. As a assistant ag fieldman.
I just had a question around the boulevards, and we've asked the homeowners to now mow in front of theirs, and I noticed that some are and some aren't. Have you been approaching, is that what the greens are
Yeah.
gonna be for, is getting those ones that's, to add that to the boulevards and say, you know, it's a change this year and?
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Danaka?
Actually, this brought up another question. Did we, refresh my memory, Councillor, did we not make a change to garage sale signs saying they cannot be there?
No, it was defeated.
Okay, thank you.
It's just removed within 72 hours.
Looks pretty, doesn't it?
All right, any other questions?
I discussed with Alan this afternoon that some residents don't understand the boulevard cross cutting, because the people that own corner lots don't realize that they've got two sides to their yard, so
Yeah.
they may be cutting one, but not the two, and I said, when you hand the green slip out to them, if they are on a corner, you have to mention that it is both sides, so.
And talk, yeah, it's a little bit of education for this first year.
And we resent it out in our newsletter again, this month, Callie had put it in the newsletter again, so. I think it's, I have had a couple calls and said, you know, are we required to do it, and from residents, and I said, yes, it's
It's
now required, so. Some didn't even know about it, so.
Yeah,
maybe-
that will help, that's a
For
good
sure.
idea. But, I know I'm on the bylaw committee, so I feel shame asking this question. It is also commercial, no, or is it just residential?
Just residential.
So, okay, no. We have some businesses who are in a residential street.
Mhm.
So we're gonna make all the residents cut it, but that one business on the corner doesn't have to cut their grass?
I was instructed just residential. That, obviously, if council desires, but yeah, I can approach the business.
Well, I thought when we made that they had to cut the boulevards, it was
Straight across the board for
It was-
everybody.
like a blanket, you
Yeah,
have
I
a
thought so
boulevard, you
too.
cut it. It wasn't not just residential and commercial, it was a blanket policy that you have to cut your boulevards this year.
Because think of how inefficient it is to send one lawnmower just for one little thing, you know, so you're right.
Yeah, I can't remember the way the wording is, we'll have to look at the wording in the bylaw and take a
But
look at that.
we need to hash this out, because like I said, we have one business in a residential street, so everyone else has gotta cut their grass except that one business that has 2 feet of lawn?
Yeah, no, but I mean, if it's not in our bylaw, then we can't say you must. We'd have to look at our bylaw to make sure, and I don't know the wording.
It was not a bylaw, it was more so a motion that was done during the budget. And the motion,
Right, that
do
is
you
correct.
remember the term? I can go get we actually quoted it in our newsletter, so I don't believe it directs one way or the other. It's just that from this point forward, the grass will no longer be the responsibility of the municipality on the boulevards. It doesn't speak to that it now falls on the ratepayers, it's assumed. So, or the commercial or residential, it's ambiguous. I don't know that we went into those details, but I recall.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to make a motion.
Well, you
We have
can't
one on
make
the
a
floor.
motion right now anyways.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah,
Might I suggest that we table this for the June meeting and then we can put an RFD together and,
and look at the ramifications and be ready for it, yeah.
yeah. Would you be agreeable to that?
And I see our CAO's writing it down, so. We've got that. Any other questions for Ellen? Yeah, Councillor Martins.
So I just saw you with Erica today, so I knew that she was, well, I assumed it was Erica.
Yeah.
So how are you structuring her time? Is it half and half admin? Because I'm looking at admin hours and there's more than 50% of.
Well, this was she didn't start till June 1st.
Okay, fair enough.
So, yeah, it's gonna be,
Shows you traffic and,
she'll be back in, typical schedule.
Saddle again?
and you're just gonna tandem hours, or have you decided that, or is it still, you guys are feeling it out?
Well, it'll be the first couple months, it's gonna be, cause she's been gone a year and a half, roughly, so. It's gonna be lots of, new stuff to learn, and then,
Is she excited to be back?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
Nothing else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We had a motion to receive for information, all in favor? All right, I get to see. So with that, let's take 10 minutes and then we'll move on some more.
Public Works.
Or we'll come back and get it. There's nobody from Public Works here.
Too bad, I got a question.
Oh, we'll get to them. We're not forgetting it. It's just take a break now and.
Martin Hogan told me he's gonna